Okay, let's sum up the chapter. The worlds of Islam, Afro-Eurasian connections, with the world of Islam as a new civilization. By 1500, the Islamic world embraced at least parts of or nearly every other Afro-Eurasian civilization. An Islamic civilization was held together by Islamic practices and beliefs. The beliefs and practices were transmitted by the ulama, who served as judges, interpreters, etc. And starting in the 11th century, formal colleges, madrasas, taught religion, law, and sometimes secular subjects. But most of the focus was on religious scholarship. And the system of education with common texts, sharing of scholarship throughout the Islamic world was also important. And while Islam had or has no priesthood, has no mortal standing between an individual and a god, a class of learned scholars and experts developed. And that's what the ulama is. It made up an international elite of scholars, students, judges, interpreters, administrators from West Africa to Southeast Asia. And the Islamic schools, those are the madrasas, spread throughout the Islamic world. And these schools were generally conservative and focused on the memorization and recitation of the Quran. Now, the Sufis, there were branches of Sufism that gathered around particular teachers, the sheikhs, by the 10th century. And it was responsible for much of the spreading of Islam into new areas. Because the Sufi mystics were willing to engage with local spiritual traditions and rituals, thus forming a bridge between pre-Islamic and Islamic ideas and practices. And often, Sufis were willing to recognize local saints and other figures, and that really won over many of those communities. And the Sufi sheikhs were teachers who attracted local students that allowed their specific devotional practices and teachings. And there was a Sufi poet, Rumi, spell it for you guys. Oh, that's not a good killer. This particular poet produced works of literature that had an appeal within and outside of the Islamic world. And thousands of pilgrims would make the Hajj to Mecca each year. All right, networks of exchange. The Islamic world was an immense arena for the exchange of goods, technology, and ideas. There was a great central location for trade. Islamic teaching valued commerce, as Muhammad was a merchant himself, and urbanization spurred the growth of commerce. The Islamic world tied together the Afro-Eurasian civilizations by linking the Mediterranean, the Trans-Saharan trade, the Silk Roads, the Indian Ocean Basin, and Chinese ports. And Arab and Persian merchants played the leading role in this vital trading system. Like I said, the Prophet Muhammad himself was a merchant, and as the elites of the Islamic world were urban, the greater Islamic world brought together a culture friendly to commerce, because those cities were eager and ready to consume. And the greater Islamic economy benefited from the linkage of long-distance trade in dynamic cities. Now, next we have the diffusion of technology. This is important because there's the spread of ancient Persian water drilling techniques, the improvement of Chinese rockets, the adoption of paper-making techniques from China in the 8th century. And this technological exchange, these trade routes also served to transport those new ideas and crops and innovations, new weapons, like those rockets, and even useful administrative tools like the paper from China. During the texts from Greece, the Hellenistic world and India were translated into Arabic and inspired Muslim scholars to build upon these earlier works. And the Arabs, the Muslims, were the ones that preserved those ancient Greek texts while Europe was in the midst of the Dark Ages and chaos. So they were the ones that preserved those important Greek writings. Crops like citrus, cotton, sugarcane all moved from the Islamic world, as did those new irrigation techniques, leading to a dramatic increase in food production, which then in turn led to population growth. Mathematics and medicine. This was important. Astronomy, optics, medicine, pharmacology. Using a numeric system from India, Muslim scholars made important advances in mathematics and astronomy. Using Greek and Indian medical knowledge, they developed hospitals, diagnosed diseases, developed chemical-based treatments, and some even performed operations for things like cataracts and hernias. And this medical knowledge entered Europe via Spain, because Spain was under control of the Muslims, and was the state of the art for the medical knowledge for many centuries in these areas. And that's the end of section 4. I hope that you learned a lot in the worlds of Islam and Afro-Eurasian connections. We'll look more at the reflections, specifically focusing on choosing our history and how people look to history to understand, where the world that we live in now.